Hello and welcome back to the Sideline Live podcast. You may have noticed that I've been gone, and I have been, but I was busy working on the Paralympics and the Olympics, and even got the chance to go to Paris. But more about that later. I had a brilliant time, but I'm really excited to bring back the podcast. I have loads of athletes and coaches lined up, and I'm looking forward to get stuck in over the months ahead. I'm Orla Keeling, and what I want to do is to go beyond the highlights and the big days to find out what it really takes to make it to the top of your game. I'm going to talk to people about their passion, their challenges, and the mindset that drives success. Okay, I'm delighted to be joined by the OGs of the Irish basketball media space, the Courtside Collective. Is it the co-founders, Tony McGaharan and Niall McDermott?
Yeah, there was a couple of others that helped out as well at the time. John one and
Helped out now. Helped out now. Way to give them the props.
well, we're involved in the formation of the Courtside Collective. Like, yeah,
We bet, Orla, is it okay if we name them right away?
Go
Because
for
if we
it.
forget, we'd be getting angry text messages, I'm sure, when they're catching this episode. So of course we had John Wynn, the creator of the brand and the logo. So shout out to John Wynn, Fiona Sullivan, a confidant to both Niall and I. All of these folks are former basketball players. I think is probably the nice way to put it. And then you had Andrew Sanders as well, and as well as Colm Heaney, I think, are some of the other OGs. But yeah, thanks for having us, Orla. It's great to be here.
Yeah, of course. The backstory to this is, I actually meant to apologise as well. I said it about a year ago, or more than a year ago, we do this and never got around to it. So apologies for that. But the backstory to this is, I was saying to you up there before we hit record, the whole kind of idea of the Sideline Live came from a couple of different factors, and yous were one of them. And I was like, do you know what? I'd love to get the lads on. Niall's been on the podcast about 20 times anyway, so I was like, do you know what? I'll get him to share his story for once. But I actually didn't realise, I was looking back on your YouTube channel, and there's a video about street ballers coming from the UK, and I read the description, and was there a page like Street Ball Ireland or something? I don't know what that is, and Jared Jago told me to ask you about
yeah.
it.
So this goes back to sort of how the Courtside, one of the reasons it started. So looking back, like it's made me feel really old. Like I'm looking at this for this podcast and looking back, what the main takeaway for me is in the past 10, 12 years, the speed at which like media and social media and like social interaction has changed is like the biggest takeaway. Like when we launched the Courtside Collective, the main thing was the website. It wasn't the social media. It was nothing really to do with social media. It was the only social media really was you would use social media to promote you had a website, and we would use YouTube for video hosting, obviously. Because when we launched, like Instagram had just started, but no one used it. Twitter had just started, but it was just celebrities and stuff. It wasn't anything like it is now. I'm not sure Bass Bayer even had any social media at the time. I think that was like the following year. So before that, even there was a website called Streetball Ireland, and really that was like the main part of that was like the message board, where you would have like people from all over Ireland, like not talking about street ball, just about Irish basketball, and just talking trash to each other. And Jer was a part of that, and Isaac Westbrooks and guys like that. When they were coming up, and they'd be on just talking trash to each other, and I might have said a few things too, even though no one knew who I was. Um, and that I came on from another website called streetball.co.uk, which I was a member of, just talk about the UK basketball and NBA, kind of that sort of stuff. So like back then, that's how people would communicate online. And before that, it was like guest books. So a website would have a guest book. People just leave messages, right? Then that evolved into forums. Then after that came social media. So Streetball Ireland was the place that people would go to talk about Irish basketball. And that site went away, unfortunately. And that was one of the reasons why, like, we had this idea. We just felt like basketball wasn't getting enough attention and the media and stuff and local media, and also just like the big game happened on a Saturday. Demons will be playing Neptune and Cork. You might find out the result on Monday morning, unless you literally texting someone you knew, hey, how'd that game go? And they would text back, oh, like they won like this. And then Bass Baird, I might put up like the results on like the Monday or whatever. So there was no like instant information the way there is now. And there was no place for people to discuss topics and what was going on. Like, so that was one of the inspirations. And Street Ireland was like, an inspiration for that for us. And then when that died away, that sort of left like a hole, so that's why we keep it on.
So are they actually the OGs then, not yous?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're definitely the OGs. I mean, even the way Niall describes it, message board
Yeah, I
forum.
was like, Niall, I'm not that young. I know what that forum
I'm not
is.
joking. So like, I think I might have had one of the first basketball websites in Ireland. So I made a website for my school teams in Collins College. So we had a school website, and I think it launched in 1997. That's how old I am. So, and then on that, we had like a guest book. So, like, it was basically guys from Somalis in Belfast coming on, giving us abuse, and then us giving them abuse back.
Now you have to stop saying guest book right now when talking about talking about the history of
I'm telling you.
technology
So, like, so just
content.
compared to today, like, basically now everybody has their own multiple websites in their pocket, their Instagram and their social feeds. Like, they have their own websites, their own platforms. But back then, you had to go and build your own, so it was a bit harder. Like.
Yeah, and I was even you shared a timeline there with me, and I've just opened up on the side of my laptop. Like, when I actually only watched it back pre-interview because I was kind of waiting here, and I was like, "Do you know what, I'll watch some of their stuff back." And I was only watching the video with Paul Dick, but that was that another kind of initial factor with him doing that interview.
Yeah, so it's funny, just like in terms of Niall and I working together, another sort of just to segue into that Paul Dick interview, which is hilarious. I haven't looked at that also in about 15 years or 14 or however many years, 13 years, however many years it's been. But Niall and I started talking about this because he and I, although from different parts of this great land, this great island, he's a Derry man, I'm a Belfast man, different clubs, but I think he and I shared this passion for, sharing in the community. And, I can't speak for down south, but certainly in the north, it was quite, everyone was really focused on their own club. Whereas I think Niall, myself, and certainly some others wanted to connect everybody else, right, and create this shared space with just the basic idea that if we're sharing everything that's going on, we're all gonna it's kind of rising tide stuff, all boats, right, will be lifted. So that was part of it. And so Niall came in with this message board guest book stuff, and I was like, yeah, that sounds interesting to me. But I was certainly, I think, now very focused on the content, the stories and the human aspect of basketball and kind of getting behind the scenes because you don't know that. You know that Paul Dick is a tremendous basketball player even back then when he was young. And but you don't know anything about him and you don't really get to see. This is pre-Facebook, pre-Instagram, pre-TikTok. There's not really a lot of content out there. So certainly early on we were kind of approaching it from both angles, which is why Niall and I were a good team, really kind of that community aspect and sharing information and connecting one another in a social media style, as well as actually the media aspect of kind of what you do amazing work with, Orla, and combining both those in the Sideline Live. So yeah, I think basically I knew Paul as a kid growing up. My favorite story that I have to tell before about playing, it was playing against Paul Dick when he was like 14 and I was 18 or something. And he taught me the week prior to us playing against each other in schools basketball. I went to Lagan College. He went to the behemoth of St. Malachy's, and he taught me a little hezzy move, and he was like, "Listen, you should do this, and this is the best. Like, you just pull up and go pass." And we were playing a game, and I'll never forget. I tried the first time and the last time I ever did a hezzy move because I'm not fast at all. I'm not quick, and I pulled a hezzy on him and I scored. And he and I just had this whole chuckle running up the court. But look, when we came to the Courtside Collective, Niall and I had to look at our who was nearby, right? Who we could access, right? And this was definitely before things like Zoom and kind of remote recording like we're doing. And Paul was so game for it. So I just went to his house and sat down and recorded a chat. So you've watched it. Was it any good?
It was brilliant. I have to say, like, I wouldn't be, the fact that I think it was like 13 years ago. Like, it's very, I would say it's a great interview. And it's funny you mentioned Zoom. Like, we're obviously chatting on Zoom now. I do that purely from a time perspective. Like, I really want to go into the in person stuff because it's just a better conversation. But even back then, you had shots. I was actually wondering what game was that you'd overplay like shots of a basketball game. Was that, it was in St. Malachy's, was it? Or what was it?
Or I have no idea. I couldn't tell you. No, I'll have to look. I'll have to look back at it now. And I just started scrolling through it, and we were just saying it's like former selves and former identities because of just the way life has panned out, Orla,
Yeah. I'm interested to know actually how did the two of you meet? You mentioned there you're from different areas in Northern Ireland. How did you meet? And even give us a bit of an elevator pitch in terms of your not only your basketball career but professionally, because I know this kind of shaped the way you've gone.
Well, I went to Queen's at college. So Tony, I think Tony was a year below me, I think. So when I went to Queen's, Gavin Garland approached me to play for Queen's back then. Queen's had a National League team and a BNI team. So I would have played with the Queen's team, and Tony was a Queen's man through and through, coming through the ranks, himself and his brother Paddy. So that's how I met Tony, basically. So I knew Tony from college and playing basketball. So we went there and played the Yeller and stuff. And I stayed in Queens, and then I went back to Derry. I had a bit of a strange career. I was a lawyer first for a few years, and then after I left the law, I was involved with like a pharmacy, and then opened my own online e-commerce store. It was called basketballdirect.com. Because I always wanted a job in basketball. Whenever I left the law and the pharmacy, it was like my parents wanted me to go back to the law, but I just always wanted a job in basketball. But there isn't many like full-time jobs in basketball in Ireland. I just wanted a job and I knew I was going to enjoy. So I launched this. It was good with a website, so we launched like this online store, and I had that for a few years, and I ended up selling that to a company in England at the same time as that happened. Just so happened a part-time job in Bath Ireland came up, and I applied for that. I didn't expect to get it, but I got it, and there we go. So, and then I would just do some also on the side, the consultancy stuff on learning. So I do like online learning and now in-person learning too. So I do work for an American company as well. But my full-time job now is Basketball Ireland. I'm the national learning manager for them. So coach education, referee education, volunteer training, all that kind of stuff.
I thought I wore a lot of hats until I heard you, Niall.
Yeah. Yeah, I just couldn't make my mind up, still say I'm not sure where I want to be when I grow up. So
Tony, what about you? I did actually ask Mark Mulholland ahead of the episode what I should ask you, and he brought up peace players, and I actually googled it. Just interested to hear your journey and a bit about that as well.
Yeah, well, first of all, yeah, Niall, how Niall and I met essentially, Niall is man about town. I think anyone in the basketball community now, north and south, will have heard. Sounds like on you on this podcast quite frequently. Will have heard his dulcet Derry tones, and look, Niall's got great energy, and I think like yourself, Orla, and myself, shares a passion for executing on ideas, and I think I've always admired that with Niall, and certainly when I was thinking about this Courtside Collective thing, there was nobody better to partner with to make it happen. So that's how Niall and I met, just through the basketball community and playing together at Queens, where I still play in my old age, but we're hanging on. So in terms of, yeah, look, my basketball connected career elements, I suppose, you know, it's been very formative. I, Coaching basketball when I was 16 years old, knowing that I was never going to be as great a player as I would like. I fell into the coaching stuff and refereeing and just being around the game. I used to announce games in the arena back when I was like 18, 19. And there was a guy in Basketball Ireland called Shane Whelan, who's moved on to Irish Rugby. He used to bring me down, I think, when I was 19, 20, and let me announce the international games live as the PA announcer. So look, it's been really good to me in terms of career. I also then fell into Peace Players International, a non-profit that uses basketball to bridge divides across communities. So here in the north, working across the Catholic and Protestant, sort of broadly speaking, communities. They also work in Cyprus, the Middle East, South Africa. So I find myself in a career there. Also, and not a lot of people know this, I ended up coaching professionally in Sweden for a year when I really shouldn't have been because I was 22 and I thought I knew a lot, and then I realized how much I didn't know when I took on this role. But I was paid a few quid. I was given a studio apartment above a pub in a place called Umeå in northern Sweden, and that all came off the back of just volunteering and being involved in the club. And like Niall mentioned, I certainly was really keen to take on a career in basketball, but after that professional coaching experience, I was like, this isn't for me. It was tough. It was tough, a lot of expectations to get results, and that's challenging when you haven't really had a program or a longer stint really in a club. So I do feel for those coaches that are hard to be fired. So yes, I went into Peace Players. I ended up taking on a career then outside of basketball. I moved to Google, and that's probably where I started to kind of branch off from basketball as a career, certainly. And I spent about 7 years in Google in Dublin, Singapore, London, came back to Belfast, and most recently, about 4 or 5 years ago, actually 5 years, goodness, started a business called People Playbook, which is inspired by basketball. You know, we know what it's like as coaches to have a playbook, a sort of dynamic resource that we can use to inform how we lead teams. And so I work closely with leaders and teams with organizations like Google, L'Oreal, FIFA, and anyone in between who want to help support their leaders and their team. So that's what I'm doing now. And on the basketball side, I've been chairperson at Queen's Basketball Club for a few years until recently, and I still coach. This year, I'm coaching the under 18 girls, and that's a treat.
Very good. Out of interest, then, I looked to across the water to Hoops Fix. I actually met Sam last June. He very kindly met me for a coffee and when I was in London, and I was picking his brain and it was really interesting. Was there any crossover, any inspiration to do with Hoops Fix? For anyone that doesn't know, it's basically like what I do times a million. Like Sam is amazing and does it full time, and it's an incredible resource for anyone in the UK. And I think probably we should maybe look at it a little bit more. But just interested, was there any crossover there with
Yeah,
yourselves?
100%. So like Hoopsfix sort of came after Streetball.co.uk. UK. So I'm sure if you talk to Sam, he would say he was inspired by Streetball.co.uk, UK, which is primarily a message board. And then when that was gone, he launched Hoopsfix. So I would know Sam and I would talk to him multiple times, like when we were launching Courtside and as Courtside was running and we go to events across the water in England and stuff. Incredibly intelligent guy, like what Tony mentioned earlier on about, someone who gets things done. That's like Sam Netter. Like that's that's what he does. Like, he really gets things done. And he's managed to make it into a full-time career for himself. I wasn't sure at the time if that would be possible in Ireland, just with the size of the market and stuff and the basketball market in Ireland. I never seen it as like a full-time career. It was more so on just we did it with the passion, and I'm sure we'll get on to we ran some events and stuff, but I'm not sure at the time anyway, the basketball Ireland community wouldn't have been of the size that you could have turned like an online blog and like a full-time career in it. Um, but Sam's managed to do it in England, and he's done it. And Hoopsflex was a massive inspiration for me, like, because when we started, a lot of the things were just like, getting videos of like a highlight from the game, like which sounds so simple now because you go on, pick up my phone after this, go on Instagram, and go on my stories, and I'm going to see 30 highlights from basketballers putting up their highlights. Back then, like I'm telling you, you could not access this stuff. Like you could not, you couldn't find it anywhere. You'd have to like it was impossible. And Sam really pioneered that and sort of putting up, crazy dunk by this guy in Manchester, and then all of a sudden everyone in London sees that. So that was our idea too. So we would, if you go back to the Courtside Collective in the very first year of stories, we used to have highlights from like, local games and that happened in Northern Ireland just because that's where we were based. Like that would get a lot of traction from the people who were tuning in, like people just wanted to see what was going on, around the country or in other parts of the country because video phones even weren't what they were today, so it was just like there's no such thing as just recording a video, uploading it, and everyone sees it 10 minutes later. Back then it was like, send someone to the game with camera and stuff. They have to email it to you, then you get it up, then you host it somewhere and stuff, and then you have to share the link and then someone might see it. But even that was like that seemed great compared to what was before. Because before there was nothing. So, that was the start of it, So that's what really inspired us. And Who's Fixed were probably the pioneers for that, for sure, in this part of the world. So yeah, big inspiration.
In terms of the challenges, I think you mentioned a couple there. Obviously, social media not being as prevalent, Niall giving us a nice history lesson on that. In terms of even the video cameras and stuff like that, I think even like I think who put it up the other day? They put up this AI generated highlight tape from a Super League game. I was like, "What is this?" And they were like, "Oh, it's this website. I forget the name of it. Niall, you definitely know
Is
what it is because it's
the
AI."
Yeah, Viso probably was probably Connor Meany sent it to you because you said you're using it this year, like so he was showing me in pre-season. So yeah, You upload your video, the AI just scans the video for you, automatically makes highlights, automatically does captions, so it can recognize behind the back dime or whatever, and it'll cut the clip out with the caption pre-made for whatever social media you choose. And there it's done like in seconds, like, you know.
Unreal. Like that's going to change the game even more. But even like, what were the other challenges that you faced? You know, starting it up. Like I had a number of different challenges that I had, but just interested in what you experienced early on.
Well, for me, like probably the biggest one was time. You know, like we didn't realize how much time it would take to do this stuff. Because I think Tony, more so than me, is the sort of person that if he's going to do something, he wants to do it right. He wants to do it well, whatever. Whereas I, as a person, was just get it live, get it going, let's go. Look, you know. Whereas Tony's like, no, let's do this right. You know, which is again why I think we were a good combination. Because I probably would have launched it on day one. Whereas Tony's like, no, we get to change this, we get to change that, we get to think about this, you know. And I think that was a good sort of combination because I was pushing things to go and he was like, well, let's just make sure it's right, you know. So like the amount of time involved, like even something as simple as like doing your logo, you know, things like that and getting like the branding right, that kind of stuff. And then like what I realized like back then too, because it was more like a website than it was social media, if someone comes onto your website and they come on a couple of days later and it's not updated, and then they come on a couple of days later, it's not updated again, they're probably not coming back another time, you know, or else for a month later, do you know? So before we launch, we try to have a content schedule laid out and the content almost pre-made, so we know right for the first 6 weeks we have like a runway of content, you know. And then the challenge was keeping the content up to date and fresh and having the time to do that because we were both working full time at all our jobs at the time, like, you know. So, and that's why in the second year at Courtside, we brought on a lot more contributors and stuff, you know, because people, once we launched, so, and we sort of suspected this before we launched, you know, if we can make this a thing, we were confident other people in the basketball community would want to join in, you know. It's particularly people more in the south of the country because they had more access to stuff down there. So we had like Andrew Sanders was a great writer for us, and we had Puff Summers come on, do articles and guys like that, and um, Luke
I
Thompson.
think did John Carroll jump in at one point? I feel like he did a piece or
Basically, yeah,
something.
there were
But
so
anyway,
many over the years. Like there was so many people who did like a guest article, whatever, you know, and that's what we wanted it to be. We didn't want it to be just this is Tony and Niall's version of Basketball Ireland. You know, it was all about building like this is somewhere for the Irish basketball community to communicate with each other. You know, through different mediums, like, you know. So like, yeah,
yeah.
for me, the
I
biggest pressure was time, probably, Tony. I don't know what do you think.
Yeah, I think time, or you'll know rightly about this as we record this late on a Friday night for all of us just trying to make the time for it, right? And that's the challenge. I think technology now's talked about that enough in the sense that, it was prohibitive. He just talked about getting people to visit a website. That was our market stall. And you had to go in and go to the courtsidecollective.com, and you weren't opening your phone and naturally going there to look at content. So and then I think for us again, and certainly just the whole concept of the name, the collective, was about unifying the island across the sport. But you can't do that if you're just recording Premier League games from Basketball Northern Ireland. Like, it's not real. So we really tried to reach out across the country to bring in contributors like Puff and Andrew, and cover stories. And actually, or I have to say, because this was one of the moments that I thought, and I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear a moment in return that you thought, oh my God, this thing that I've created has legs. I think we were just chatting about it now, weren't we? Like the Andrew Sanders article that he wrote about um, Jermaine Turner back in whatever, it's in there in that timeline. And it was brilliantly written. I mean, Andrew is like an academic, PhD, professor, lecturer. I mean, he is phenomenal and did the work and wrote this very lengthy article. Now, I wouldn't have the attention span myself to read it, but it turned out everyone was interested in this story about Jermaine sitting out and taking Basketball Ireland to court over eligibility, having, I think, forgive me if I'm getting the story wrong, but I was to do with citizenship and being able to play as an eligible Irish player. And it was brilliant, Orla, because for us, I think that really elevated the Courtside Collective into this space of being a formidable, credible source to tell useful stories. Because if the Courtside Collective's not telling that story, Basketball Ireland aren't writing that.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Orla. I don't know, Orla. Does that? I don't know if you remember that, or if you heard of that, or. And I'm curious if you've had a similar experience with the Sideline Live.
Yeah, I actually didn't know the full extent of that, and someone actually put it up in the questions box I had on Instagram to ask about that, which is on my list. But in terms of me with a moment, I two came to mind, and I think, and I laugh when you say your name was so much better picked than mine. As I said to you, Tony, before we recorded, I'm the Sideline Live. I've never once been live. Like
Not
it's
yet.
just
Not
it's
yet.
so when it happens, it'll be a big moment after 5 years of doing it. Um, Probably, I think Niall, you were probably involved in it. There's two moments to me that are kind of ranked one. They're both ranked number one in terms of my favorite kind of moments. And even the fact that you said there, you moment that you felt like it was going somewhere. I actually only started this because it was like I want to see stuff and I want to share it because I'm interested in it. And I'm actually surprised that people like it and watch it because it's just stuff that I think is interesting. So it's actually mad that other people like it too. I don't know, but Niall, I don't know if you remember, Jordan Blent did an Instagram live. He did a takeover during the men's. I think it was a takeover during the men's under or no, the men's senior, European Championships in Dublin, and you were with the under 16 girls out in. I forget what country it was in, but you're out the Euros, and he did a live, and the girls joined the live, and they joined the Instagram live, and you tweeted a photo, or I think I tweeted it out, and then you replied to it with a photo of all the girls sitting around the phone and all watching it, and I was like, there's something here. And then as well, probably a little bit later on, was I had Paddy Lyons on. For anyone who doesn't know, he's from Moycullen. He was in a corporate job and decided to go back and play professional basketball during COVID, and was in Spain, and he said he shared a memory, and it was funny, we were chatting for a couple of weeks before we recorded, and he saved it for the recording, and he said, I've been meaning to tell you this for a while. And I was like, oh God, what is he going to say? This was on the podcast. And he was like, I was in a tough spot in Spain. I think it was Spain at the time during COVID, and I was listening to the podcast he did with Adrian O'Sullivan, and I said, you know what, I'm going to keep pursuing this professional basketball thing
Wow.
because someday she could ask me to be on the podcast. And I was like, I was actually speechless. I was like, I don't know what to say to this, because I was like, this is, again, because it's just things that I think is interesting, and for someone to have to say that to me and they had that effect, I was like, oh, I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is mad. So two probably a little bit different stories, different timelines. Again, Paddy's thing was probably maybe 2 years in, but it still just resonated with me a lot. That it was like, wow, people actually listen. I just thought it was mad.
That's so cool. Now you have to tell a story about. I'm sorry, or if I'm jumping your question,
Not at all.
because
Take over. Take over here.
I'm now in the memory bank. But now we were scrolling through our YouTube channel there. My one of my other favorite moments of Niall, because I was away at the time. I don't know if I was in Singapore. I don't know where I was, but Niall went out and did. They had the London games. I think it was the London games, and he just asking like asking NBA players to choose teams who's going to win the Irish Super League, and having like what did you call the point guard? Devon, was it Devon? The Nets guard.
Darren Williams.
Yeah, Darren Williams, and he was like, "I'm Irish," and I just there's just such great, you've got this Derry man, right, with this thick accent, amidst these absolute NBA stars. And here's Niall asking the most stupid questions of them with pure like confidence and brass and conviction because he knows that it's going to be great content. And I remember I wasn't involved in that at all, Orla. I saw it come up like the rest of us on a feed, and I thought like Niall's putting Ireland on the map with NBA players while we're all over here just getting on with our days. I think now that was so epic.
The NBA stuff was crazy. Like, so we launched in 2012, and if you remember, me and Tony had been to an NBA London game before. It was the Lakers Timberwolves one, and we managed to get,
Just as
yeah, just
punters, as
as fans,
punters.
like, just went over. The Lakers Timberwolves, Kobe was there and stuff, and we got tickets to the after party, the official NBA after party, and we met.
How? Of course, you got tickets to the official after
Yeah,
party.
Shout out Dave
Dave
Cullen for
Cullen, yeah,
those.
we asked for words. So we get on, and like we're there chatting to Kevin Love. Kobe was like swamping people. Like there's pictures of me and like Kevin Love and stuff and Tony and all these NBA serious players, and all like the background staff and the coaches and all. So anyway, I was like, this is really good. So I think I just the what happened is the it was the first event was the Team USA were coming to play GB as a warm up for the London Olympics and in July Manchester. And I think it was Sam Netter gave me the link to like the press. Like, so I applied for this, right? And I thought there's no chance there is no chance they're going to give me a press pass for this, right? But you know what? If you're not at it, you can't win it. So I put in for a press pass for two. And a couple of weeks later, an email came back, oh, you've been approved. And I was just like, I started to laugh. I was like, this is so at the time Tony was away. So for that one, it was Mark Mahan was going to come along. Mark has his own media company, very good with cameras and stuff. So Mark was going to go, but then it turns out the way these events normally work is you go over a couple of days before. The day before, they'll have like an open training session where you'll have media availability, and do some community event or something like that. And then on the day of the game, they might have another media availability with the players, sometimes not. And you have a pre-game press conference with the coach, and then you have the game, then you have a post-game press conference with some of the players and coach, and you'll have them in the mix zone and stuff. So Mark couldn't make it to the training session the day before. Something happened, a wedding or something the day before, so I had to go by myself. And like this is my first time doing like any kind of media stuff like this, like this, right? So I'm in the room with like ESPN and BBC and Who's Fixing all these people, right? In the media, and I'm just blagging everything, like and they give me my press pass stuff. And I didn't even have a camera because like it was just my Mark was the cameraman, like so there people there literally with like film crews and like cameras and like five, six people teams and all. And I was just there on my phone, just going over talking to these guys. And it just so happened the very first one was like Team USA, which is like LeBron, Kobe, Chris Paul, Kevin Durant. This is like one of the best Team USA teams ever. I sort of stayed away from LeBron and Kobe because they were just always swamped. My tactic was it's Team USA, so even if it's like the ninth, tenth man, it's still an NBA All-Star. So which at the time, so I got an interview with like Chris Paul, Kevin Durant, Darren Williams, Andre Iguodala, bunch of others. And then also the women's were there, the Team USA women's there. So we talked to Gino Auriemma, Candice Parker, Maya Moore, Diana Tassori, like all like legends of the game. It was just me with my like Samsung phone just talking, no other special equipment, like. And then Mark arrived for the games and he got brought his proper camera and got some high quality photos and all. But I just thought that, this is great. Now, unfortunately, I don't think those interviews are the best because first time doing it. And what I quickly realized is that when you go to these events and you're speaking to the NBA players, they get the same question 100 times. Like, so everyone's asking them, oh, how's your knee injury coming along? And, what's the game plan for tonight? And all these stuff, right? So I was like, and you can almost see their eyes sort of glaze over and they just give you like this sort of like standard media response that they've been programmed to say for that question. So I was no one's coming to the Courtside Collective to find out, like Kevin Durant's calf injury. They're going to ESPN or they're going to where Hoops Type or whatever, like. So we got to get content that's specific to us, right? So like we just ask random stuff and it went down very well. So I was asking about like just random like it evolved on the I bring an iPad or a tablet and I had like pictures of it because it just so happened the NBA London would always be 2 weeks before or a week before like the National Cup finals in January. So I just bring them like the two teams with like squad photos of the teams and just say things like, who's going to win the game and why and like, what I think of this player, who's the best player in this team based on their photos, based on their profile and stuff. Because then I was just forced them to speak about Irish players, Irish teams, which is relevant to our audience and they'd have a hard time pronouncing the Irish names and stuff. So it was just like looking back, like it was sort of mad that I think we kind of took it for granted that we just access to like all these NBA players, and every year I'd apply for the press pass, every year I'd get accepted, and every year I would laugh. I just feel like, okay,
Honestly, Niall, honestly, I don't know why you didn't invent TikTok because I feel like it's like the exact type of thing TikTok. Or to tell me I'm wrong, tell me that's not TikTok content he just
That
described.
That would be peak Irish basketball TikTok content right there. That's certified by the Sideline
Yeah,
Live.
well, that's the thing. And back then, well, this is coming about later on. Like this is the first, well, Team USA game was 2012, and then went to the NBA in 13. I think they skipped a year, and I think they were there 15, 16, and 17. Tony then went over to the NBA All-Star game in Houston. So with Andrew Sanders, so we get offered press passes for every All-Star game, the NBA London games, and the NBA Finals. Like it's crazy, like
Yeah,
you know.
it's
Sorry, you've just made my last 5 years of my life. Just why am I doing this? Like I haven't gone to one NBA event.
not yet, Orla, but with Niall's connections, no, yeah, they won't let him
Well, see,
back
I think
in,
I think the thing
unfortunately.
was too, like see now, look, there's so many platforms, there's so many like because of social media, there's so many platforms that the NBA are cutting back down who gets access, you know. Back then, like we were probably the only publication from Ireland that applied for a press pass. So we picked.
Now, there's no probably about it. There's no other Irish publication media outlet going, oh, I fancy going to London to cover. I mean, come on. And this is
Yeah.
2012, 2013. And like, yeah, Orla, I still can't get over. And what's really frustrating, you can tell Niall and I were winging it because I barely have any great photos because again, this is sort of certainly pre-smartphone for me anyway. And or very very limited tech. But like, yeah, the NBA All Star Game. What has this kid from Belfast? What right does he have to be walking it in and amidst the LeBrons, the Kobe's? It was just a Kevin Durant. I mean, just absurd. Really walking in and out of these press rooms. It was absolutely the craziest thing
But
ever.
then we,
Yeah, that's
well,
unreal.
actually, there's one we. So the NBA, my biggest regret is not just going to the NBA Finals. It never sort of synced up time wise, and like you had to go for like 3 weeks. Also expensive because usually you had to go to both venues. So you're going East Coast to West Coast, so you had multiple flights and stuff. And just never happened. But one year, there's a guy called Mike Kilo. So Mike would have played basketball, Tony myself, and he's originally from Ohio. Massive sports fan, massive Cavs fan, you know. And we got talking one year, so like, would you go to like the NBA finals and cover like the Cavs against the Warriors, LeBron against Steph? Like, he's like, of course I would, like, you know. So we got Mike, give him our press pass, you know. So he went to the NBA finals.
Let me just be clear. I did not approve of this choice, and that was an executive decision from Niall
Yeah,
McDermott.
probably was. It was probably he probably has talked me into it, in fairness, Mike. Like, you know, but anyway, so we sent Mike to the NBA finals. I know he could produce a single piece of content for us. I'm not. I don't even think he went. And actually, I remember because I would stay up and watch the NBA finals live. I like to watch, especially the finals. I like to watch them live because I like to like scroll on Twitter at the same time to see like the real time reaction to what's happening and stuff. You know, I remember there was a tweet about I think it wasn't Zach Lowe, but it was somebody like that tweeting about there's some guy in the media section who just keeps standing up and screaming and shouting about the Cavs. I'm convinced he's drunk. And I was like, is that Mike Halo? I can't say I can't confirm or deny it, like, but it could be him, like, you know. So, but I regret that I never went to the NBA Finals. We took the opportunity for granted, I think, you know, because we just kept getting.
Hang on, speak for yourself there, and I'll take the opportunity for grant. No, I'm only joking. No, and like Niall, obviously, we're a bit younger and we can't afford to fly across the US multiple cities. The only reason, Orla, that I was able to go to the All Star game in Houston was because I was over in Washington D.C. for work with Peace Players. So it was just a domestic flight. So it only happened to be because of that. There's certainly no way I could have afforded to fly to the US for the absolute crack of it, for the Courtside Collective. Absolutely no revenue generation in this business ever, ever. Not once really has there been money made in this thing. It's just really a labor of love, which you'll appreciate. I do find it funny, Orla, though, because we were just looking at videos, and in terms of knowing that this happened a while ago, like the current news with Luca and AD, and then I just saw a clip of Kyrie there on the news just talking about Luca leaving and being traded, and then we were looking through our YouTube channel at Courtside Collective, isn't it? So, and yeah, feel free to share that or and actually download and bring them on the Sideline Live, whatever you want. But there's a clip of me asking Kyrie Irving a question, and I remember the only reason, to Niall's point, why I actually went up and interviewed, quote unquote, Kyrie was because he was part of the Rising Stars Challenge, and nobody in the press really gave a crap. Like, and nobody was near him. Nobody was near him. And then it's just wild because I'm looking back and I had this full conversation. We only share like a minute clip, but I probably spoke to Kyrie Irving for like 5 minutes because no one was at his press booth. At that time, we didn't know, the world was flat. Now we know.
Yeah, no, it was just because I was going to follow, and that is like we were looking through some of this stuff. We had like a Facebook group at the time, not even like a WhatsApp group chat. It was a Facebook group, where we were planning content and stuff. And there's messages on there like, does anybody want to speak to Damian Lillard tomorrow at 4 o'clock? And like, and people is like, no, no, couldn't be bothered with that. It was just like, because I remember like we spoke to we had interviewed Steph Curry on the phone. We interviewed Magic Johnson in the first few months as well. Like, like, it
Yeah.
was it was unbelievable. Like.
Oh my god! Because on the document, I don't know if you're going to share that on your socials. I think it's an unreal timeline. It's like 2011, the members, 2012, January, Courtside Collective starts, April, All Star Game, July, Team USA, and lists all of like these NBA players. Like, oh my god, this is like this. This is what do you say to Chris Paul when he asks, "Where are you? What is the Courtside Collective?"
He doesn't care what the Courtside Collective is. None of them cared. I mean, I just laugh at picturing Niall over there trying to make sense to them, and then asking them about Colester. It is funny, Orla, because in that timeline, and it's funny because Niall and I just put it together there before we set up this interview, and yeah, you've got these NBA players, but then underneath that, Orla, more importantly, I spent the weekend at the Irish National Cup weekend finals, and I had no business being there either because I really wasn't following a lot of basketball down south. As Niall said, there wasn't a lot of content, so I didn't really know who I was watching, what was going on. But because of some stuff that we had done, people kind of knew who the Courtside Collective were. But I remember, yeah, you'll see cooler names there: Mimi Clark, Adele Thornton. That was, and the Quinn twins. Like there's such a great clip. I don't know if you remember seeing it, or that came out a couple of years back when the Quinn twins were part of the Belfast Stars Super League. They think they won the cup, and they showed a clip of that video of me interviewing them when they were under 18, and they were like, mark our words, we're gonna come back here and win the Super League Cup with Belfast Star, and they like cut it in and produced this clip. And I think for me, and I think for Niall too, those are also just epic moments that now with these players' names I've just mentioned have gone on to have really great basketball careers.
Yeah, I actually have because I remember. And actually, another moment was you say it just came to me there when you said moment when people. I'm taking it as when people kind of take notice was actually Paddy Sullivan tweeted because I put a load of effort into the cup final or the cup series intro. I took a load.
Hang
of
on,
other
this was your
clips.
video?
Wait, what?
The video that you did, was that your Basketball Ireland, that video I'm talking about with the
No,
Quins?
no, I don't know
Okay, I
who
was
did
like,
that. I don't know. It wasn't me, but I made the intro for the cup series for the podcast. Sorry, and I was like, I have to have the like. I don't understand why we don't have in every single gym in the country and every single Irish game and every single game in the arena the Chicago Bulls intro song because that to me is just goosebumps every time I hear it. But that's my own opinion. I was like, it has to be that, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take clips from it, and one of the clips is the Adele Thornton clip. I remember Paddy Sullivan tweeted, "Oh, the Sideline Live Cup intro was class." I was like, "Geez, people are tweeting now about the podcast." But I remember because I remember when
okay.
Adele won the cup last year. I purposely just before I interviewed her, asked her, "Would you do a quick interview?" And I have to say, everyone I ask is just so generous with their time. They're always willing to come out and just give me so much time to interview. And I said, you know what? I'm going to phrase this in the exact way that you phrased that question. And if you go back, it's the exact same. So I haven't seen the Quinn one, but I send you on Adele's one. But I just want to touch briefly on Jermaine Turner because that was actually, here we go, Gino Auriemma, Diana Taurasi, Kevin Love, Magic Johnson, and then Jermaine Turner interview. And you said it's quite a big moment, but just give me a bit of background on that particularly for listeners that are maybe younger that don't actually know the backstory to that.
Now I'll probably be better at telling the outline, and definitely now I think you can take over. For me, it was news to me because again I wasn't. My brother Paddy is the star of the family in terms of basketball. Quite literally, has played Super League forever, and and he played for Ireland, captain Ireland at a junior level, so he's plugged into the community down south for sure. But I really didn't know a whole lot. But I remember even for me reading that as somebody who is interested in basketball and human interest pieces around people and what's going on. That was such a well put together article to represent the challenges that Jermaine was facing. Now, do you want to give the high level kind of what was going on at
Yeah,
the
well, some
time?
people might just sort of give like a background of what the situation is. So in Ireland, like there's very sort of specific rules about player eligibility that don't really exist in other countries. So if you're an American player playing in Italy or France or wherever, and you have like a French grandparent, whatever, and you manage to get a French passport, you'll count as a French player in that league. So that makes those sort of dual nationality American players very valuable in countries. In Ireland, it's a bit different. So like the rule basically in Ireland is, I'm assuming it was brought on years ago because there's so many Irish Americans. So you could bring in like a team of Irish Americans and just dominate. But you have to have played 2 years basketball, I think between the ages of 12 and 18 in FIBA Europe to be considered what's called a FIBA Europe developed player, right? So that makes you like sort
Mm.
of, so that means like if you come now the rules have changed again this year in terms of that's so now you have to have like a certain number of Irish on the court. So in the National League it's two Irish on the court, in the Super League it's one Irish on the court. But anyway, back then, so Jermaine, even though he'd been in Ireland for so long and he had family here and he lived here and I think he has Irish citizenship, he was still considered as an American player. So he was making the case that this was unfair on him because, basketball was his job. And if he was considered as Irish player because he was an Irish citizen, then he would make him much more valuable to the team because they could have him and they could also bring in an American. So this was basically the crux of the case of like why he was this say ambassador discriminating against him because he's Irish citizenship, he should be counted as Irish. And this is a debate that's
Mm.
going on right to the present day about this stuff. There's other players out there now, like Puff Summers is a good example. Puff has been here for I don't know how long now, a long time, and he is like, he's had kids here in Ireland. He's lives here full time. He's I don't know if he has his Irish citizenship, but if he does, he would still be
Mm.
considered as an American player. So
Yeah.
that was the crux of the case, and Jerome brought the case, and Andrew Sanders did, like Andrew, as Tony mentioned, is a very intelligent guy, very good writer. He's got a few books published, and he did like a in-depth piece about the whole situation and the rules how they are elsewhere in Ireland and the case and the arguments in the case and all that kind of stuff. And it just caused like a lot of discussion within the Irish basketball community, because it's
Yeah.
a lot of times when people talk about finance sometimes in Irish basketball, they don't have the full picture. So you'll get very fierce arguments, and this sort
And
of
now that was,
yeah,
and now that wasn't that if I recall correctly, we got to figure out how to get that blooming article back. But I think Andrew did a great job presenting the case in a pretty
yeah,
fair, I mean, and well researched way. All I remember is probably the last couple of sentences, which was basically like, here's a guy that can do all of these things in Ireland as an Irish person, but he can't play in the Super League as an Irish player. And I remember reading it and getting goosebumps, going, this is really helpful context and narrative that otherwise wasn't going to really be talked about.
yeah. So it was like, yeah, so that was a big, as Tony said, in our first year, that was the first sort of piece that sort of like really took off and we were getting loads of hits and people were sharing it, people were talking about it, people were coming to us and asking us about it and stuff. So that's when we really realized, yeah, we were right to start this site. There's someone here, there's a need for this type of, because Basketball Ireland, as the governing body, they're not going to publish like opinion pieces, that they're going to give you the same as any governing body. They're going to give you like the facts around the sport, promote the sport, and promote all the positive stories in the sport. They're not going to do like a sort of critical look at aspects of it, and the same way no governing body would. The difference is what other governing bodies like rugby or GA, other people are doing that. At the time, there was no one else in basketball doing that, so that's where we sort of seen the Courtside Collective could follow. Yeah,
In terms of growing an audience, you mentioned there not having social media, you had the website. even the podcast, like I only really got into podcasts in 2020, maybe late 2019, and then decided I'm going to do this now. Like it was kind of weird. But you had a podcast before podcasts were like a thing, or like these days,
Yeah.
if you don't, like, who are you if you don't have a podcast?
So, right. So the podcast, what happened there was about a year after we launched, 18 months of launched, that's when social media really started to take off. Twitter, and Facebook and stuff really became popular. Like, Facebook became popular in a different way. Like, to start Facebook was people, your styles always start with like, Tony McGaharan is hungry today or something. That's what it would be like, where people started sharing the content and stuff, and then you could start finding. When we started, one of the main goals was like somewhere we could just share results quickly and stuff, and people in the country can contribute. Like, Bass Byron started taking care of that. Like after we launched, we're like, right, well, there's no need for us to do that now, like, because they're doing it, and Bass Byron had their social media then, and they were doing stuff. But I listened to this podcast. It was called the Basketball Jones. It then changed to like the Starters years later. He's just friends from Canada who started doing it in their house. But back then, it wasn't really like podcast players and like that. You had to go to a website, download MP3, and then like listen to that. Like, that's how it works. So, but I really liked it. I was like, this is more fun than writing for like, and trying to get your grammar right and stuff. You can just turn a microphone on and talk to somebody. So idea of starting a podcast, but technically, again, that was more difficult at the time because iTunes had like podcasts. So you could put podcasts and we got them on iTunes, but back then, like Spotify and stuff, there was no Spotify section, there's no podcast section on Spotify or anything like that. Like, iTunes was the only place. So, and not everyone has an iPhone. So, we had to build like an RSS feed and then like put like the podcast, upload onto that and host that, and then so people can subscribe and they get an email when the podcast came live, or they could get it for your website, or we embedded it on the website. But it's not ideal having it embedded on your website because people have to go to the website, press play, sit in front of the computer for an hour and listen to the podcast. You want it on their earphones. So that evolved over time. So we did the podcast over a number of years, and then like podcasts we started to become more popular, and that's when we stopped the podcasts. Whenever I was like, yeah, everyone's doing a podcast now, so what's the point anymore? Also, I started working for Bass by Ireland, and I so if I continue to do this podcast, my employment will not last like very long, like because they're on fine at some time, and someone's going to get offended, and it's just going to go bad, like So, it was time to wrap it up. But the podcast ran for before. I think the last one was 2018. I think
Yeah, I think that was the last one. It was like a review of the year, I
Me,
think.
I think it was me and Connor Meany, was it, that
Yeah.
did a review of the year. Um, but the podcast is great too. Like, and that was a great way of getting like other people in Ireland involved. From what because you just get them on a phone call, whatever. Like so we spoke to like James Weldon and Gloria Dwyer and Mark Scannell and Paul Kelleron, Jordan Blount, all the usual names. And just every week we have different people on and stuff. So yeah, it was great. Like.
How do you find it now when you look at all the new pages popping up? And I probably compare myself a little bit to you that I'm not a videographer. I can't edit. I can't do a weekly Super League podcast in it because it just takes up way too much time. But even looking at the new pages now, like Game Time have done a lot. BIW, in terms of he more so kind of reshares the content that's there now. Game Time kind of go out and do clips, and there's other pages. Just has the Irish game changed because of social media yet, or are we still too early for that?
Definitely. Definitely has changed because that like I think if we were launching Courtside Collective today, like right now, you actually might have a chance of making it, at least someone that could make money and stuff, in terms of like, advertising stuff, because like the community now is so much more interconnected. Like whenever I was play basketball in 22, if you went to a trial for like a regional team, right? So if you went to a trial for like, a Northern Ireland team or whatever, or an Irish team, you have no idea who 90% of people there were because you just don't, unless you played them in a game, you wouldn't know who they were. Whereas now, the players coming through in kids, like if you go to like an under 17 Irish player now, and like they go to a trial and there's like 100 people there, they probably know 80 of them. Do you know what I mean? Like just through social media. So the community is much more interconnected. So if someone takes off, if there's a clip or something that happens, it spreads way faster. Just because the community is so, and that's because of sites like Game Time Highlights and people like that. Like, So the more the merrier, it's great for me as a basketball fan, like it's just they keep up with stuff, it's almost there's almost too much now. They keep up tracking everything, like, but it's way better than what it was when you had to, really go and really look for stuff and try and find it, like.
Has it changed the game on the court though? Have players changed their style because of it at all? Obviously the Steph Curry effect, everyone taking threes and all these fancy things we see in America, but in terms of the Irish Super League, has that changed because of social media?
I don't know if like the style of basketball has changed, but definitely what has changed is like celebrations and stuff. Um, like there's a guy played for us last year, called Keelan Coates. Played for UL Eagle, or sorry, Limerick Sport Eagles in the National League. Keelan's our American. He's a great guy, great player. And he did celebration when he would score a 3-pointer. He would shoot the person after. Now you need to be careful because that could be a tech, but he would do it, and people loved it. The kids all loved it now, and now I see that happening all over Ireland. Like I see people doing this all, and before he came, I'd never seen that before in Ireland. Like. So things like that definitely spread. But I don't know if it affects like the style of play or as much or whatever, but like definitely like just like the culture aspect, like, if you look at something like, like even like ISO basketball and things like that too, like, what they've done, like, you can see like their influence all over Ireland now, the young generation coming up and all those ISO socks are everywhere you look. So it's social media now is definitely having like a bigger impact on the game than it did. Don't know if it's affecting the quality of the game as much. That's a harder question to answer, like.
Mm. Speaking of social media, how did the LeVar Ball shout out come about? I want to know how the backstory to that one.
Oh, that was for the league, wasn't it?
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
that,
yeah.
yeah. So that was well, Tony. It was Tony's idea. Tony ran. Whenever like the website started to slow down because like really because of like the rise of social media and stuff, like there just wasn't as big a need for what we were doing, like. And plus we're both had tight different time pressures with work and stuff. Um, but we still sort of kept like the brand going, and Tony launched like a Courtside Collective Summer League, which just sort of like, well, Tony, you want to talk about that, like, what your idea for the league?
Yeah, look, yeah, it started off, as you know, this from the message boards or guest books or whatever the heck they were called way back then, and then this idea to get more Irish basketball media out there, so we got to hear more stories from across the island. And then it really became just a lot of fun as well for us to be able to go see NBA games or like, US players at the Olympics or the All-Star game, and that was great fun. But we took it seriously, and even though I know we had fun doing it, it was with a purpose, minus Mike Kilo mistakenly making his way to the finals and representing the Courtside Collective. And then, if you think about the original mission, Orla, it was about, connecting basketball players across the country. And I've participated in our local club's summer league for ages, for years. Like at that stage, probably 10 years of summer league where it's a mixed league, it's co-ed, it's quite social. And there was just this gap for me as a player in the summer where the season would end, you play a little social basketball, and then July, August, there was nothing. There was the occasional game going on, but not really. And I love the game. I know Niall does as well. I know you do, and I just wanted to play. And so through the Courtside Collective, I thought, well, I've got an audience and I want to play basketball in the summer. And I think the gap in the market at the time was a competitive league. Now, we actually aimed to have a men's and a women's at the start. But again, the problem back then and still here, I think sadly in Belfast, there's just not enough, women players and to have a league. But I remember we ended up doing like pickup games for women, but to try and be thoughtful and create equal opportunities for playing. And I think it hit or miss for the first few years. We cut it and then eventually we brought it back, which was awesome. But back to the original gap was a competitive league during the summer. And we tried for women's, didn't work, but we did for men's, and it took off. And we did a draft because most people know people up here, and if they didn't, my brother and I would help them choose players. But we did a live draft over a couple of beers, and we had six captains, and it was a six-person league. But it was competitive, and everyone got a T-shirt with their name on the back at the time, Yeah, it was 8 weeks of basketball. We started this summer league back in, I think, what do we say now,
15, is it?
2013 in the end, I think. Yeah, I think it was earlier. I'm quite sure it was earlier because I was leaving for Dublin. I think it was 2013. Anyway, Orla, then I think what happened with LeVar Ball was we'd been off for a year, maybe with COVID, and I thought, oh, it'd be so fun to launch this, and Cameo was around. I thought, let's get a Cameo done, right? And LeVar Ball seemed like the right guy to do it, which is quite funny. It was a couple $100. It was money well spent just for the laugh, right?
Oh, you paid for it?
Yeah, it was a cameo. Yeah, I mean, you can buy him yourself. You can get him to do the sideline live right now. You should just, yeah, go to Cameo and just ask him to say what you want, and it's just the funniest thing. And obviously, we personalized it to make it feel, really relevant for us. But yeah, really proud of our summer league. We had ambitions, Niall and I, to take it to my brother, to take it to Dublin when I moved there. But I found Dublin to be so
Disconnected.
St- yeah, disconnected both geographically but also from a culture. And I think we're spoiled in the north, like, Niall and Derry and the Ballymena folks and the Belfast folks. I mean, there's good relationships really, and everybody kind of knows everybody, and there was always kind of players coming to play together and just a real community, which I didn't find in Dublin when I lived there. I played for UCD Marion, and shout out to them, like it was grand, but you weren't really, there wasn't any connection to any other club really, socially or to compete.
Yeah, that's nearly, I think, a podcast in itself, the kind of geographical effects and connections between different counties and cities and stuff. It's interesting. There's a couple of people have a lot of different opinions around it. I won't go into it now because I feel like we'll be here all night, and I'm conscious that you probably have more of a social life than I do. I actually, Tony, I want to ask you about this because it actually, when it came to my attention during the summer. I was working with a colleague and turned into a great friend, Katie Kirk. Backstory to her is she's a background is athletics, but she competed for Northern Ireland, the Commonwealth Games, and was an Irish athlete. And we were talking about Northern Irish athletes, and I actually have an episode to go out now with Gavin Noble, the head of Team Ireland for the Olympics. He led Team Ireland to the Olympic Games, high performance kind of manager and brand head of brand. And we had a great kind of 5 minute segment. I'd love to do it again, just around identity and where sport fits in for Northern Irish athletes. Just because, like, even I remember, I think CJ Fulton was asked in an interview, you could have represented Great Britain, and he said, well, I want to represent Ireland, that's why. But just interested in the different dynamics of Northern Irish athletes, and I thought your background with peace players might be a good kind of way to kind of get your insight on it.
Yeah, it's well, let me humbly say I will speak on behalf of my own experience and thoughts on the matter, and also just as a person who's grown up in this part of the world. It comes up regularly. I mean, when I think of my own identity, when I'm asked where I'm from, the only real response I give is Belfast. If there's any more information required, I usually poke fun. I say, well, I'm from Belfast in the north of Ireland or Northern Ireland, but that's political, and we chat about that later, because that's the contentious background that I think many of us up here face. Now, thankfully, I think times are changing and identities are more fluid, generally speaking, in a really good way. And so more of that. Certainly from a basketball perspective, I think the reason that peace players existed was because it was somewhat of a neutral sport in this part of the world. Um, so I think that was the thinking rather than having GAA or hockey, rugby, and various other games. So look, basketball is an amazing sport for bringing together different people. And I was just coming out of the venue New Forge, where we held our All-Star game last year. We're going to hold it again there this year, which is exciting. And the center manager there was saying, you know, it's basketball so great because I just meet so many different types of people coming in the door in terms of not just religious backgrounds in here, but foreign nationals. But it's tricky. I mean, there's been a Paul Hughes bit out about the MMA, and I don't know if you saw that, but he flying the tricolor, and Conor McGregor calling him out about that. I mean, so it's certainly still contentious, and certainly in the spotlight. But look, I think in my experience, I'd be curious about Niles. I think the basketball community has been fairly inclusive up here, and actually I have to say, hats off to the governing body and the folks in BNI. They're very thoughtful about it and trying to do more outreach in this space to make sure that all communities are represented. Is that fair now?
Yeah, that's definitely fair. That's one of the strong things about basketball. Like, I think out of all the sports, basketball must be one of the most inclusive sports in all of Ireland. Like, when you look at like the gender split, like especially at the underage levels, like male, female, 50-50%, and then like there's so many nationalities that play basketball, that if people do come to love or visit Ireland, like, there's a high chance basketball, if they're a sports person, basketball is going to be high up in the list usually for probabilities. So, basketball is really multicultural, and that in Northern Ireland, when Peace players came, I think their first year was 2001, 2002, around that time. Um, so when they first came, basketball was like it was a completely neutral sport. Like in Northern Ireland, like a lot of like sports teams will have just like a reputation of being like from one community or the other. So it just sort of depends on what the area they're from, whatever. Because like unfortunately, in Northern Ireland, a lot of places are still segregated housing wise. So like if you're a certain estate will be seen like as a Proud state, another state is Catholic. It's changing slowly over time. And since then, through the past 20 years, it's changed greatly. Now you'll have much more integration and stuff and more integrated schools. But it's a slow change that's happening over time. So even if people aren't necessarily sectarian or whatever, they just come from a segregated community because that's where they're born, and everyone around them comes from the same identity. So basketball is great for that, I think, in sports. So like, I think for athletes in Ireland trying to decide that question, I think it's always a personal decision because anyone born in Northern
Mm.
Ireland automatically has dual citizenship. You get an Irish passport, you can have a British passport, and you can decide to represent whoever. It's an easier question like
Yeah.
basketball and rugby because that's like a 32 county sport, so there's only one national team for the entire island. So the question, but then for other sports, you have that choice.
Yeah.
Like
Now, can I interject? Or I'm about to tell a story, but I'm terrified you're gonna have to cut it if it's wrong, and you're gonna have to fact check it. But you brought up, I think, the Fultons there, and now please tell me if this story is right or wrong, and if the Fultons listen to this, forgive me, because this is a story that I heard probably 20 years ago, and I just think it's funny if it's true. So I think I heard a story about one of the Fulton men, Adrian's brothers. I don't think it was Adrian.
Mark,
I think it might have been Mark. Do you know where I'm going with this story?
nope.
So there was a story about Mark Fulton, Danny, right? And Danny Fulton, a famous, well-known, reputable head coach, coached Ireland. And I think I heard a story. I'm so like scared to tell it, but I'm going to do it anyway and trust that it'll either get cut or somebody will laugh about it. Hopefully the Fultons. But I heard a story that Mark Fulton possibly was selected for both the Irish junior national team and also Team GB at one point in his junior playing career. And he had the option. Then he has now said, you have the right if you're from this part of the world, you can choose, Team GB or the Irish program. And the story I heard was that when Mark was faced with that difficult decision, which probably wouldn't have been that difficult given his family's connection to Irish basketball, he faced a dilemma because seemingly the training camp for Team GB was in Florida. And so he obviously chose to play for Team GB because he got to go to Florida. Now, if that's true, it's the funniest thing ever. If it's false, please forgive me, Fulton family, whom I love. But Orla, isn't that hilarious? And now, is that true?
It sounds
You
like
heard this?
something that Mark Fulton will do, so I'm assuming it's true. Like, but I can't. So
So yeah, so identity goes out the window and you get some sunshine in Florida. That's the story.
Yeah, that's a good point, Niall, about 32 counties in terms of rugby and basketball. I never thought about rugby as well, but even when we talk about, um, even the diversity piece around it and inclusion, and it struck me in a LinkedIn post the other week by I think she's the head of Teneo Ireland. Her name now escapes me, but she put up a post, nothing to do with professionally. She just said, "I want to share this. I brought my kids to this event, and my kids aren't." As kids there these days don't have great attention spans and love the game. They were hooked on it, and she was just highlighting the diversity in the communities and the backgrounds and everything to do with the whole event and how great the arena looked, and credit to yourself, Niall, and all the other BI staff. It looked amazing, and the little touches that were put in. And I think basketball, even you mentioned equality, Niall. I think we were probably, I don't know if this is true, but were we one of the first sports to be equal across the playing field?
I
I would imagine
like 50-50
one.
split.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, 50-50,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I think so. Like, I'm pretty sure. Like, and it's been consistently that now for a number of years. I think it might have switched to like 55-45 or something like that, but it's right around there. Like, and like I worked for Playing for Peace too for a couple of years, not in like a full-time job like Tony, but just as like one of their YBIs, they're called youth basketball instructors. So like the whole idea was you go into a school, do like a 6 week program, whenever, coach the kids, go to another school from a different part of the community, do the same there, and then you bring them all together for events and blitzes and stuff, and you mix the teams up and all this kind of stuff. And it sounds really simple, like, but like you'd be amazed how many kids that would grow up and they would just never even speak to or meet someone from like a different community. And like it's very just like now again, it's changing every year. It's getting more and more diverse, and the communities are mixing every year, and like the housing's changing every year. But 20 years ago, like it was like really like you're from one side or the other. That's what it was, and like like the street I'm in, like it would be the Catholic area, and I'm not sure there's a single like Protestant family in the whole street. When I was growing up as a kid, so I go to like an all Catholic school, so you just never meet them in your day-to-day life, and you would hear stories about what they're like and stuff like that, when you're a kid ever. And then you go and play basketball and realize they're just the exact same as me. They're just, the exact same as me, like, literally, like, and we both love basketball. So that was like the idea behind the program. And it's still going to this day. So it's still going like 20 years later, like, and doing a great job, like. So, but I think that applies across all sport really, but I think basketball specifically because of it is no tie to any community in Ireland. It's like seen as more of like a international sport. And you have the gender split and you have the multicultural split from different nationalities. So it's just a complete melting pot of anyone and everyone, which is pretty. And at the moment too, I think basketball's doing a great job in terms of inclusion with athletes who might have disabilities, stuff like that. With like the Special Olympics teams and the wheelchair teams, and loads of clubs now have inclusive teams. So I really think basketball is
Mm.
one of the best sports. I'm probably biased because I'm based in Ireland, but I really do believe it's one of the best sports for inclusion across the whole spectrum.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's some level to go as well. Obviously, before with the diversity committee and stuff like that. I think there's probably always areas for improvement, but I do agree. I think across the gender divide, across the work that's been done, as you mentioned there, with up north, and but even like the Special Olympics and the wheelchair basketball as well, and the fact that I have to credit Basketball Ireland as well on including the wheelchair games or the wheelchair cup finals as well. I think that just adds to the occasion. But for me, the fact that we only have one disabled toilet in the National Basketball Arena still, it's 2025 is mad. Anyway, I'll move on from that. I just want to, I'm conscious of time as well, guys. If you have to go, let me know. I do want to ask about, you said the biggest challenge was time, and for me it's time as well, and I've taken kind of forced breaks and unforced breaks and been in and out, and I always laugh when people message the page like, hey guys, and it's like, well, it's actually one person and my name is Orla, but anyway, I think everyone knows by now, but like, this is tough, like, and I'd love to see more people do it, but I think people just realize how much time it takes, and I'm probably an idiot for giving up this amount of time. Did you feel worn down, and was that kind of why it maybe kind of took a dip and you're not as active anymore?
You mind if I go first now?
By the way.
Because I feel like I dipped out before you. I think Niall was so good at trying to, as not trying to, having created a career in basketball, and I think Niall always had that clear vision of that's where he wanted to be, and has done a good job navigating that. We were just joking, Orla, before we jumped on about what do we do with this thing called the Courtside Collective? Do we kill it? Is it dead? And now reminded me that we should keep it even if it's dormant, because we bring it back now and again. We brought it back last year for excuse me, for another All-Star game, which was fantastic, and in memory of David Durkin last year, and raising great funds for suicide prevention. And we're going to do it this year, probably for a different cause, but with the same sort of spirit of bringing people together. But yeah, the time thing, Orla, certainly, and even now as a small business owner, leader, yeah, it's hard, and you've got to be pretty ruthless. I think the challenge for us, I think Niall talked about this already, is we were kind of ahead of our time for the market, both in the technology space, we were before social media, um, and then now in the podcast space before podcasts. And so we never really got to kind of land it in the right time where you could potentially gain revenue in order to live a sustainable life in this passion area. So I think for me it was very obvious that as I got older it was always just going to be a passion project, because we kind of missed the boat with just the way things grew both technologically and the game. Oh my God, you asked earlier, it's like it's the coolest thing to look at the sideline live and see the takeovers and go, "Oh, this is so." I'm like learning about the people in this game that I love across the island that I have no idea about, and I have no idea who they are, and I'm seeing them, and just tremendous content, BIW Media as well. Just anyone that's doing anything in this space to elevate the game, I just tip my hat to them because it's a labor of love, and I suspect, Orla, for you, in order to make sure it's sustainable, because as you mentioned, what happens is you can dip in, dip out, and that's not good for anyone, not good for you, not good for this beautiful thing you've created called the Sideline Live. And I think you have to prioritize ruthlessly and say no to a bunch of things. And I do think the best way to grow, and I've seen this with our business People Playbook, completely outside of the Courtside Collective, and the way I've grown our team, is very thoughtfully and bringing people in, the right people. And I think if you can do that, Orla, to help scale your operation thoughtfully, sustainably, it's going to be good.
Yeah, someone said to me before, I think it was around the cup, because last year I joked that the cup broke me. I like after cup finals I just had to lie down for like a week. But yeah, I think someone said you need a couple of minions. Yeah, I feel like it doesn't feel like pressure, and I don't like the word pressure, but at times I'm like, well, if I don't share it, nobody will,
Mm.
and that's what kind of bothers me in a sense, that like this shouldn't be, not that it's on me, but like people rely on me to share things, and I don't like, I'm the first person to say, and it's very funny, early on in the page I think he's put up like like panel picks, like who would you pick for these teams on Twitter, and I put up a team and I just put up all the girls that I had been mercifully bet by as a terrible underage basketball player, including Claire Amelia, who bet my team by about 80 points when we were like under 15 or 16. um and
She's
someone
pretty
said,
good.
yeah, she's turned out okay, I suppose. I wonder who had the better career. Um, but I remember like someone said, you don't know basketball. It's like, so I don't like, I'm not the biggest like basketball genius, and I will be the first person to say like I'm not very good at social media. I just like the stories behind it, and it's like if I feel like if I don't share it, nobody will, and I can't believe that it's still only me kind of sharing these things. And it's like other people can see it. It's just like I'd love for, and it's not about, like the numbers don't bother me. I don't look at those. To be honest with you, I've never had notifications on my phone for any of the apps, because for me it's about the people and the stories, and the fact that it's only me really promoting that. It's like I wish someone else was doing it, you know?
Aye, but no one else will, Orla. So you have to keep doing it. And, and let me also say, I got a call out, and I know it's cultural, and I suspect as well, with my own privilege as a white man, uh, you're not bad at social media, Orla. I've
No,
looked at the sideline. No, no, I won't allow it. I won't allow it. You're clearly very good at it. Otherwise, we wouldn't all be investing time now to share stories, because you've created something that's really important to the basketball community. And I think what I would say to you and to others who are listening to this or supporting, or sorry, benefiting from the Sideline Live, is you have to find a way to monetize, to generate some revenue and income, so that this can be something that, not only that you give to, but that you get something back. Because if you don't, it will break you, it will end, or it will fade out, and none of those are good options.
yeah.
So if
So
you're
link
listening
to
to this,
Patreon now.
exactly. So if Orla is Orla if Orla's collecting any revenue, back her, back and support, the Sideline Live, because that is now, is that fair to say? I mean, that's why, we couldn't really crack that, and therefore we have to work to survive and live. That's absolutely part
That's
of
the
it.
thing. It's hard to have like, if you're doing something like this and it's a passion project and then you have a full-time job, then you basically have like two full-time jobs. And then if you do other things, like I coach a lot of basketball, at the minute. So like, I was coaching the basketball back then too, which take a lot of hours. There's only so many hours in every day. Do you know? And then if people have families or whatever, like it just to do something like this, to do it well, you need time. And people don't realize. I think people think. I think you probably can do it a bit quicker now because you have better tools online, stuff to make content and stuff than you did back then. Like, but it's if you want to do it well, want to do it right, I think it requires dedication and time, and you've definitely done that order with the Sideline Live. And I think we did it in different spells, with different areas. But for me, it was just like I was always been passionate about basketball, and one of the things was just the need for the site wasn't there anymore because of the rise of social media and everything else. Like, like the stuff that we wanted to push out, most people we still maybe the article stuff we could have done, but really like the community exists now. Everyone's connected now anyway. Do you know? And I really enjoyed doing the podcast, but as I said, I didn't think working for the Federation, working for Basketball Ireland, and then doing like a independent basketball podcast about Irish basketball at the same time, that just didn't work. That just wasn't a good going to work. And plus the basketball community is so small. It's like, you're always,
So what are you trying to say now? You
I
weren't
was,
comfortable offending people on your podcast, so you had to
yeah,
destroy it. Was
I was
that?
basically saying that if you're going to do a podcast and you can't say what you think, what's the point in doing a podcast? Basically, 'cause
No,
so
you've been censored.
yeah.
No,
So
that's
I would
fair.
probably get guests on and try and get them to say what I thought, like, just try and prompt them, like, in the direction. But so yeah, so we never actually sat down one day and said, right, that's the end of the Courtside Collective, because we had these events. So the Summer League kept running year after year in Belfast. The podcast went on for a while. And then the big one was bringing back the All-Star game last year. Tony alluded that earlier on. That was a great event to bring back. The original one, we had a guy, it's just Tony mentioned there, David Durkin, who blew everyone away in dunk contest with a phenomenal performance. He's just a very talented young player from Lisburn. Unfortunately, passed away a few years later, so we brought it back last year. It was Tony's idea, and he did a great job promoting that and raising money for suicide awareness. And that was a great event, and we did it for players from all across the country, and like they came up and supported in Belfast. So we'd love to do it again this year. So I think like the Course Like Collective, like although it's not what it was, just I think it's a good idea is to keep that name there, and when the opportunity arises to run an event like the All-Star game, we can do it off the Courtside Collective brand, and rely on that sort of goodwill from the basketball community that's still supported it.
Yeah. Was there anything that you wished you had done and didn't get a chance to?
Yeah, I wish I went to the NBA Finals. I remember like I
um,
was going to I had another job too. Where I worked for this company in Madrid.
Another
Yeah,
job.
well, it was linked to basketballdirect.com. So basically, it was a teamwear company based in Madrid. So I was there rep for the UK and Ireland. So it was called Gift. Just doing jerseys and
I remember that
yeah,
actually.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Madrid a few times a year and to meet the head office and stuff. And one of the times it was over, I was like, I fancy going to see like a Real Madrid basketball game. So I just went to the EuroLeague website and found some email and emailed the EuroLeague and said, I'm a reporter for the Courtside Collective. Can I get a press pass for this game? And before I did it, I just did up a blog post of some EuroLeague game, put it up. So when they checked the website, the first thing they'd see is some EuroLeague report. And they email me back a couple hours later, yeah, there's your press pass. And it's like signed, like so I just got a press pass to the
that's
Real Madrid game.
amazing.
So like yeah, I regret not doing more things like that, and just I suppose like yeah, probably I don't have the time. Like whenever I basketball direct, like that was my own business, and sort of like whenever you have your own business, it's like as Tony will know this now probably. Well, actually Tony has a very different because Tony's done a very good job of having good work-life balance stuff. There's people play about 4 days a week.
We're a 4 day
Yes,
week
yeah.
yeah company for
He's
years.
one of these like new age Google guys, 4 day weeks, 5 hour days, like yoga classes at lunchtime, all that sort of stuff. Um, my business was not like that. It was like 14-hour days, stressed to the max non-stop. And just taking 3 weeks off wasn't really an option, like, because like, and then in fairness, it was my own fault because it was like a one person band at the time and I had other guys, but there was no one else who knew all the operational details. So I regret not taking more time off and just going to the NBA finals, to be honest, like, because like, I don't think I'll ever get the chance again to be a reporter at the NBA finals, unless I start a brand new website, but I don't think I have the energy for that. Like,
Tony, anything that you wanted to do and you haven't done yet, or was the All Star game bringing that back? Was that something that you
Yeah.
wanted to do?
Yeah, well, just thinking about what you were saying, Orla, about the sideline live and referencing other platforms, and I think as you're doing, you're finding your voice in this room, and at the time we were the only voice, like genuinely, like we were the only voice, and so I think for you the different challenges figuring out what's your voice within this noisier room. Uh, like yeah, in terms of like I think because we never killed the Courtside Collective, it sort of lives as a flicker of light in my heart that one day I think Niall and I will, I suspect bring it back in different ways. And we've both used it, Niall, that story's like, I didn't even know you absolutely did that for a EuroLeague game, you absolute chancer. But I think, we've used it for what we've wanted to do, right? And I would love to do more events. I'm big into just bringing people together, and I think the more we do that, the more we increase the human element to the game, the better. I just love to see people enjoying the sport and each other. And I think when it came to, the All-Star game, it was when David passed away, and I was at the funeral, and oh God, it's hit me now, but like just feeling this wave of emotion that here was a young man that was such a monumental icon in our first All Star game, and to just be at his funeral at such a young age was absolutely devastating. And my brother and I were pretty quick, like we're going to do something here in his memory, at least once, and um, we did. We followed through in that execution. We made it All Ireland before it was just BNI, and I have to say, like, hats off to the players from across the island that were given of their time and talent and participated. And it just took a village as well. There was such a great group of volunteers of people, too many to name here, but everyone pulled together because it was with a really good cause and purpose, and it was just so great to bring it back to life. And I think when it ended, because for me, it was such a joy seeing the players treated so well. We put them up in a really nice hotel, and we fed them and we looked after them, and they got Nike kits before Nike was a sponsor. I knew, by the way, that Basketball Ireland and Nike were in conversation, but that was quite cool to know that when we were getting the kits done, and to be able to treat them with respect and show them value, and then for everybody who went to the event to benefit from watching an amazing game and just really enjoy themselves, and a great new venue, a new Forge, and shout out to them for being partners and allowing us to use that facility. Has been amazing, and obviously just everyone really chipped into that. So for me, that really lit me up again, and so much so we booked this year coming, and I was like, oh no, and now it's getting closer. Orla, I've already reached out to you. I can see the sideline live playing a big role, and shout out to BIW Media. I can see lots of people coming together for the right reasons to do this event, but again, make no mistake, it took time, it took people and talent, it took energy, and it took a lot of money. Like I thankfully our business, People Playbook, had a great year, and I was like, hey, we're just going to bankroll this, and it probably cost 8, 9, 10 grand sterling, which is significant. But it was the coolest thing ever, like just to have that game and the 3-point contest, and my brother and I did it together, and it was in David's memory, and his mum was there, and she said some words, and now I was coaching, and for me, it was such a great welcome home to Irish basketball moment for me personally, having been living overseas and not really connected to this community. So, do I regret anything or regret not doing anything? No, because I think Niall and I, probably you have reinvigorated us, Orla, just by bringing us on to think about how else we can come together and do more of this great work.
Oh well, no pressure because I can't wait to see what's gonna come back from the Courtside Collective, and I can't wait for. Do you want to share the date?
I do want to share the date when I remember what it is.
I think it's
I
is
better,
it May 10th, or I actually
it's
did put it in my
May
calendar.
it's May 10th, and so if you're an Irish Super League player, Irish national player, I'm sure some of you are listening to this podcast from Orla. Like, yeah, we'll be in touch. Yeah, and like my brother and I did our best to frantically select players, and I hope we can be more inclusive of all the clubs. But like you got to pick a group of guys, and I know for Paddy and I, it was really focused on good people, and that was also I shout out to my brother for that and helping pick a good group of guys, and they were all really they were there for the right reasons, and they checked their egos at the door and gave their best. So yeah, May 10th in Belfast. Who knows what we'll be doing, but would love to see as many folks from across the island that are interested in all-star basketball. And I will say this, sort of, it's a bit cheeky as well, but the other reason I booked it was because I didn't want anyone else to do it. Because like Niall said, I believe I believe I have a vision for running an epic event. Now, it's not an I, it's a we. So many people adding to it and making it awesome. But like Niall said, I have no interest in doing something subpar. And I think that event captured, any of the footage and photos you look at, like it was top shelf. And I would not want anyone else on the island trying to replicate it and not doing it a service. It's got to be elite because these are elite athletes performing and it's got to have that look, feel, and vibe. And I say shout out to Basketball Ireland and Basketball Northern Ireland for all they're doing to improve how our game looks and feels. Mark Mulholland in the North, he and I have talked about this, like just packaging the game is so important because we are competing against GAA all the bloody time. My under 18 girls don't show up to practice because they go to GAA and they prioritize that. And anything I can do and the Courtside Collective can do to ensure players see the value in being part of this basketball community, then let's do that. Let's win over players and keep our athletes in this game.
One thing I was saving for this was I actually had an idea for the All-Star game a couple of years ago, but it just, to be honest with you, it's too much work and I couldn't pick of time of when, because all the pros go and then there's Irish teams, and then people go on holidays and the organisation. So when you told me about it, I was like, I have to get involved because I've been wanting to do it, and I had the whole idea on a notepad my notes app on my phone, which is like 700 notes in my phone. But Connor Meaney tweeted about it last year, and I replied to it, so you can see that
Nice.
note from like 2022 when I had all this stuff done. But I had a couple more questions for yourselves. Where's the gap now in the media space in Irish basketball?
Well, as Niall reflects on that question, Orla, look, the Courtside Collective, as I said, it may come across that I've got an ego there in terms of vision for the All Star, but like anyone else that wants involved, is welcome. And I would love to see the Sideline Live as a big part as a partner because it's like we don't even have a brand. It's the Courtside Collective from 10 years ago, so it's more about just doing the thing and doing it really well. So I
Yeah,
will be reaching out to you to pick on your ideas.
amazing.
Sorry for interrupting. Now,
The gap in the bass and media market. I think it's probably actually what we talked about already. That sort of long form sort of piece like that Andrew Sanders did. It was great. They have now Connor Meaney doing stuff for the Examiner and stuff, because before him, like, it was very little like in the mainstream media having like that sort of just basketball coverage basically, But like you want somewhere where like people can have like serious discussions about how to improve the game and that kind of stuff. Um, what I found when I joined Basketball Ireland is like before I was in Basketball Ireland, right? Something would happen, an event would happen, Jermaine Turner would happen, or a similar event, or something would happen, right? And you'd see people complaining about it, right? And I seen it then when social media came around, you see people slating Basketball Ireland for like ABC, right? But then when you work for Basketball Ireland, like you get the full picture and you understand why decisions have been made, right? And sometimes the reason behind the decision can't be expressed or put out there, but the people in there, like no one is sitting there saying, right, how can we mess this up? Everyone's saying, like, what's the best? How can we do the best for basketball? That's everyone's goal. Is everyone wants the best for basketball, right? Okay. But sometimes when there's like something happens, you don't get the full picture. You just get a headline, and the headline might be like, in a negative, and then you get the social media piled on and complaining about stuff. And I don't think there's really somewhere where people will do like because now you have social media, you have lots of like sort of quick short hits of like highlights and stuff, right? But maybe if I'm wrong, point it out like somewhere where there is that more sort of blog style where it's like here's like a 2,000 word essay on why like this should change. Now the flip side of that is anyone going to read that apart from maybe me and five other people? I don't know. That's where like I see the media. But in fairness, like I think like when you say where's the gap in the basketball in the media at the minute, it's like the mainstream media, I think, So TG Gahar do a great job for us for our cup finals and for our international games. But for like the Super League and for like the all local leagues, like you don't really see like that media coverage. But look, that's a historical issue of basketball. That's not, that's always been the way. And I think more friends like the sideline live, more friends like, highlights and all like just like it's an ecosystem and everyone grows off each other. And so like is you grow the whole pie, like that's whenever like the mainstream media will get interested because they see it as worthwhile because they'll see the interest, they'll see the numbers, they'll see like the metrics. So I think just more of what's happening, like more BIW media and more game time highlights and more people like that and more people because like the more people get interested in basketball and then like they'll go on in their own professional career, a different job, and all of a sudden you get a basketball person now working in our team. Like I think that opens the door. Like, do you know what I mean? It's just like you used to like, grow the pie slowly. So like I think just more of the same really. But I'd say where it's missing is probably that sort of still that top end, that mainstream media piece. Like.
Yeah, I love the way you mentioned Conor Meaney. He's actually the reason why I subscribe to the Examiner and pay it every month. And they now do their GA podcast as well, which I listen to as well because it's on a paywall. But yeah, you're right. And it's funny you mention RT. I've only come from the studio. I was on 2FM talking about the game. But you're right. It's trying to find, and I have a line of a piece going out about the Hickey sisters playing time. And one of my final lines in the piece is, for a sport that struggles to find its footing in the stronghold that is Irish sport, we need stories like this that have a bit of magic. And I think we need to get better at showing the stories. And I have to say, while saying that, I feel so privileged that everyone that I ask just gives me so much of their time and patience. And I ran over to the senior women's training to get a few comments, and I was trying to do other things and I got shut down this week, and that's fine. And then I got an email to say, yeah, we got your clips out on RTE about, James Weldon and Adele Thornton. And it's like those little wins that you just trying to get. But I do agree, it's that historical piece that we're trying to push. And even like this week, it's like soccer's on, and you've got the international rugby, and you've got GEA, and you've got so much other things. It's like, where can we find that piece? And it's so hard because we have to fight twice as hard to find that magic to sell it. And
Yeah.
it's like, and that's where I feel like eventually I could burn out, because it's like I'm searching and searching and searching, and it's like, how do you keep doing it? Like, it's hard. But Tony, do you have any thoughts on it?
I think just more people like yourself, Orla, that are contributing to this, ecosystem. And I, yeah, I think it's a combination. It's probably I mean, if I think about how I consume basketball media from the NBA, I'm interested in three things. I'm interested in, first and foremost, the game being captured and filmed and highlights. And Sam Needer, Hoopsfix, unbelievable for that. So that's one kind of strand of it for me. I think on the other end of that spectrum, the human interest stuff that you do so well with the takeovers and just feeling like I care about that person. I mean, when I go to the occasional Super League game, it's usually to support my brother. But from there, I've met some of the other Belfast Star guys, and in the Super League, and they're local, and I get excited once I get to know them. I'm like, oh, I know that guy, and it's fun to support them. I'm personally connected. So I think those human interest stories that you're talking about. And then I do think in the middle are the pundits, are the people that talk about what's happening in our game, and that's you, Orla, and representing us and our sport in mainstream media, but also just creating your own. And I cannot wait to be the person that helps realize the sideline live to become live, because it's now become a personal mission of mine to make it happen. I think the All-Star event, we're gonna figure out a way to live stream properly, because I think those three components, the highlight tapes and the game content and the short form, I think the human interest stuff, maybe longer pieces, stories about the Hickey sisters, I think is beautiful. It is magic. And then the bit in the middle of the pundits kind of commentating, like interesting, engaging folks. And I know that even when I was following very loosely, I think it was Tim McCarthy, and there were stories about him, and he was a pundit. So
In the New York Times, they did a piece on him.
Unbelievable. So again, there's a need for that too, and that there's a desire. But if you do that, that's the flywheel. I think things will pick up. But ultimately, what you're doing really well that I admire, and the reason that I was happy to spend my Friday night here is that you are ensuring that you're doing it at a quality level. There's a quality to the work that you're doing. You're not just winging it. Your podcast is well presented and packaged. Your logo is excellent. Your color, your branding. I notice you're using a blue mic head. I mean, things like that are really important to me as somebody that is consuming media. I want to know that they're taking it seriously and putting in the effort and caring about the details. Because John Wooden, one of my favorite quotes from him, the most winningest basketball coach in college basketball history in the United States, said it's the little things make big things happen. That those little details are vital. They make big things happen. And I think if everyone continues to do what you're doing, yourself and all the other platforms, but everyone's got to take responsibility. It's not Basketball Ireland's responsibility to grow the game. It's each and every one of us. So fair play to you as well at the Sideline Live. This has been awesome.
Geez, I feel like you're just all you're doing is complimenting me on my own show. This was not planned. I've not teed them up to do that. So, but thank you for the very kind words. I do want to touch on, and I'm very conscious of time as well. Will we have an NBA player, and are we actually closer to having a WNBA player before another WNBA player before the NBA?
I think we probably are closer to having a WNBA player than an NBA player. Like the NBA and WNBA, it's such like an elite level. Like it's like a super, super elite level that people don't realize. Like it's just so far beyond like the level we're at. Like you see like the Irish women the other day playing against like the French team, like I think that Irish team is full of like professional level basketball players, girls who have played professionally, who could play professionally, who have played professionally. Um, and France are on a different level. And when you get to the the Olympic silver medalists, but it just shows you like at the elite level, that's what it is. Like, and obviously Claire Amelia playing professionally in Spain at the minute. Um, who's at a extremely high level, but the WNBA is a level again above that, Um, it's hard to say is it closer to men or women because I feel like if you're going to get an athlete that's going to make it the WNBA or NBA, it's almost going to be like just like it's a random genetic person that comes out who's just like super talented, But the key to that is like the bigger the basketball pie is. So like my big thing for developing basketball and developing any sport, like, is increased participation. It's very simple for me. Like I think one of the goals of basketball Ireland have like as many people playing basketball for as long as possible because you know if you're casting a net and you have like 10,000 kids playing basketball and there's like a 0.001% chance they make the NBA. Well, if you have 100,000 kids, now you have a 0.01% chance. Well, if you have a million kids, now you have 0.1 chance. Well, if you have 10 million kids, now you have 2% chance, whatever, percent chance, whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? So it's simply like the more kids you get playing basketball, the more fun you make it for them at a young age to keep them involved, big believer in keeping like especially at the younger, under 10 or 12, under 14 level, just make it as fun as possible and get as many players involved as possible. And the longer they stick at it, the more chance you develop some sort of like athlete who can come along and just like, make it to that very elite level, but you can see now in the past few years, like the standard is definitely improving. Like the women have went from like the small countries up into like Eurobasket qualification, playing against the Olympic silver medalists, in the space of a few years. Um, and the men have went from small countries too, and like, they're competing, and you can see the number of players we have now who are capable of playing at a professional level. Like the men's team, we have guys playing professionally in Europe, playing professionally in Ireland for Irish clubs, who are getting paid to play. In the women's side, we have some playing professionally in Europe, but also and some playing in college in the States. But a lot of the girls who are playing in Ireland could play professionally if that was what their goal was and they wanted to, but they're doing other things, or they're studying, or they have jobs, careers, sure, whatever, So we're just a higher standard of players. So they just keep doing that, and then I think the NBA nobody is probably some time off yet, but it looks a lot closer now than it looked 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Guys, we're going to have to do part two. I have to bring this to a close because it is now 9:30 on a Friday night. Um, Tony, you must have been listening because you gave a bit of a quote. I'm going to go with the sideline seven. Niall has managed to escape it every time he's been on the podcast, so I have to pin him to it now. Sideline seven, it's the same 7 questions at the end of every episode. Question 1, guys, favourite quote?
So, okay. Are you using, is that your quote, your John Wooden quote?
Well, yeah, but I'm going to actually give one from my mother now in addition. My mom always used to say, you only get out what you put in.
Very good.
Favorite quote. I'm not good at this quick fire stuff. Should have thought this.
Niall, have you not listened to the
Yeah, I
podcast? You
have.
should know
I
this was
I
coming.
didn't know this is coming now because I just thought this was a Courtside Collective podcast. I didn't think this. Favorite,
I'm
come
not,
back to my favorite quote. I'll have it in a minute.
okay. Best sporting event you've been to, and I'll split that into 1 as a fan and 2 as the Courtside Collective.
As a fan, the best sporting event I've been to is Derry City playing against PSG in Paris in the European Cup. That was like Derry City playing, 1 game away from the group stage of the European Cup. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. That was a great event. As a Courtside Collective, take your pick from any of like the NBA London games, like because that was just a great experience. You get to go over, chat to the NBA players, ask them stupid questions, and then also every year managed to get after party tickets because of the connection to Basketball Direct. So it was just like a great 3 days. Loved them all. So
Yeah, for me, yeah, I think my first ever NBA game, I was 16. I went to see the Knicks. It was Allen Houston and Sacramento Kings. It was Mike Bibby and that crew. So it was the first NBA game. I was in awe. It was unbelievable. From the Courtside Collective, look, it's tough between our two All-Star events that we've run. Obviously, the last one was very emotional and meaningful. Uh, and yet, I think the first one for me sticks out because it was a dream and a vision, and I think even the people closest to me, friends, family, loved ones, were didn't really know what it was going to look and feel like. But to pack out University of Ulster for BBC to cover it on the news, and for us to be selling tickets at £2 a pop, which was wild if I think back to it. I just think back and I think, wow, what a great experience to do that in my early 20s when I was winging it with lots of help from everybody, including the folks at University of Ulster to give us the venue, but just everybody pitched in. That was awesome.
Amazing. Niall, I don't think Derry City will ever play PSG again, so I'm glad you got to go to it. Question 3, biggest setback or challenge so far? I have in your careers, you can pick any facet of that, and how did you react to it?
biggest step back in my career was probably when it was whenever I left the law. So I was a lawyer, and there was a couple of months of uncertainty and stuff, and then I decided to go out on my own with like a basketball business. And 2 months into the business, I can't get too specific here, but 2 months into the business, we got some pretty bad news about the business, and it was like, have I just messed up my whole? At that stage, you feel like you're messed up your whole life. But it actually came around, and we managed to get it sorted. And then that just it's funny how it just opens so many different doors then like you just go off on a different path you didn't expect. And even though that business then moved on from it, that led on to other things, and I'm very happy where I ended up so
Geez, I can't wait to dig into that later offline. Yeah, biggest setback, and not to jeepers bring the mood down at the end of the podcast, but certainly for me, back in wasn't last year, the year before, in September 2023, our business people playbook, we'd landed our biggest gig in Barcelona, and it was going to be 150 liters in this beautiful 5-star resort, and I'd built a great agenda and plan. I had the whole team coming. It was about 8 of us. It was going to be amazing. It was our um, sort of highest cost event as well, so it was a good earner. And then my mother passed away, and just shocked me, understandably, and I think just losing her and the grief connected to that. It's interesting. I don't often separate work and life, and in that instance, it was very clear, which is a greater priority, and how one impacts the other. So certainly, when my mum passed, that was a huge setback, uh, in terms of just kind of finding my feet. But I think like Niall, his comment about finding sort of silver linings or things within that in terms of ways forward. Certainly, I'm clearer now in who I am as a result of that, and yeah, how much I get to live out my mum's legacy in my work now. So in some ways, it's springboarded me in the right direction.
Wow. On the flip side, then, your biggest achievement to date for both of you?
Biggest achievement to date for me. Is it sporting career or what? Because that's not.
Whatever, you take it in whatever facet that you want.
I do have a couple of Ireland silver medals, in my basketball career, so that was a quite a big achievement for me. Never got a gold, unfortunately. Um, it was for me, probably it was getting a national league team established in Letterkenny in Donegal. Like whenever I went into that role, we were told that that wasn't even on the table really as an option. But we managed to make it happen. We went about 6 months and get it operational, and they're still there today because I thought it was really important. Like you mentioned earlier on, like it's an ecosystem, and if the young players coming up don't have something to aspire to and something to look up to, and so the reason for that team was obviously to try and compete and win, but the main reason was to give the young players on a ladder to go up in the area because you know when you're like 17, 18 and you're ready to step from like under 18 to senior or local league to national league, there was no option for those guys unless they had to drive 2.5 hours, So that took a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of just like convincing and things like that. And yeah, I'm really proud that we pulled it off.
And now you look at Killian Gribben in America playing Division
Well,
One.
that's the thing. Like we
You know,
Gillian Gribbon, that go played Division One in America. We have Maria Keeley, who played in the National League Women's team there, playing at Quinnipiac. We had Shannon Cullen go to the States, come back. We have Emma Grimmon playing in America. So they're there because of their own hard work and talent, but just I think having the national league team in the area is a big part of developing young talent. They got there's a great clip of whenever our first year we beat Fuller Matthews in the National Cup, and it was we beat them with a buzzer beater at the end of the game. Guy, first year, first American guy called T. John Cassiel, and he had a buzzer beater to beat Father Matthews in the cup. And we did the many ones at the start of the year, so it was a big one for us. And you see in the corner of the video these two young lads who are doing like the four hours of the game, jump up and down and go mad, and going crazy, And those two guys are playing on the team now, like 6 years later, whatever it is, So like that's what's all about to me, So yeah, that's what I'm most proud of.
and that brings home to me and the burnout. And I think our one of the things we need to look at in all sports in Ireland is volunteer burnout. But they're the magic moments that keep you in it.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, I gave all these years to this thing, but now you've got, even that moment, aside from all of these great players that have gone off to America and stuff, like those little moments. Tony, for you?
I think for me, with setting up a business model where everybody wins, what I mean by that very specifically is I think that the people that get to work with me love working in the business and enjoy what they do. They have the creativity, autonomy, and space and flexibility to do stuff that they're talented at, and they're rewarded well for it. And the clients we work with, they receive absolute white glove treatment in the space of leadership team development. And I think the participants that receive our work in this space, I think they win. So it's just really cool to have set up a business model where everybody wins. That's awesome.
Amazing. Question 5, advice to your 18-year-old self. Again, you can take any facet of the journey there: sport, courtside collective, business, whatever you think.
And buy as much Bitcoin as possible. My advice, and just it's that's for simple best. No, for in terms of courtside collective, it would be just like don't take those opportunities for granted. Like I remember a great quote I got. Actually, this fits on one of my favorite quotes as well. Number one. It's a coach, a guy called Kevin Eastman, who coached and around the league, and he was assistant coach of the Boston Celtics. I think when they won, not the last championship, the one before that. But he had a quote that says, "If you ever get the opportunity to do something, always say yes." So, and we went into more detail, and basically, like, I've tried to do this as much as possible. So, say, like, for example, if you've got like some event on this Saturday, and you get around it Saturday and you go, oh, I couldn't bother to go to this, I'm not going to go. Like, unless like the alternative is something like really productive, I would always try and just go because you never know who you're going to meet. You never know where that connection is going to lead. So like he says, like just say yes. If you have an opportunity to do something, just say yes, go do it. Even rather than just unless you're doing something else that you has to be done or really also productive. If you're doing nothing else, you have a chance to do something, say yes, go and do it. And you know what? Most time it might be a waste of time and you regret it. But for the one or two times that opens the door to something that opens the door to someone else, at least like so many things through the Courtside Collective, so many of the great experience we had came from having a connection with someone. And then that person knew someone else. And then that opened the door somewhere else. And then 10 years later, that opens the door somewhere you never even seen possible coming 10 years before, you know? So that's my favorite quote. And it's going back, like, I think we did that, but I think there's a few more times we could have said yes. I could have pushed that door open a few more times, like.
Amazing. I've so many things come to my mind with that in terms of my journey to date as well. So that really resonates with me. Tony, I'll go to you.
Well, this next one's going to resonate even more because I'm inspired by something you said earlier, and it's actually on the back of what Niall has said. What I would tell my 18-year-old self is to enjoy the struggle. And if I'm not enjoying the struggle, I'm struggling for the wrong thing. So if I think things are hard, life is hard, doing what you're doing with Sideline Live, doing what we did for the Courtside Collective, certainly my business, but I love the struggle of all of that. I love the struggle of the Courtside Collective every moment, trying to figure out events or leagues or content and working with a team. And it's the same now with my business at People Playbook. It's not easy all the time, but God, I love the struggle of it. And I know you do, Orla. I know you love the struggle of it because of what you're doing, because it is a struggle, but you're enjoying that journey. So fair play.
Yeah, it's interesting. I nearly think it kind of bonds us together a bit more as a community, that we have to kind of, not that we have to struggle, but it's more of a struggle, that when someone is doing, like, I loved what you guys did, and it's like because no one else did it. Do you know that kind of way? And even pushing the level of the sport, I think it bonds us in a way as a community, unlike other sports. Do you know? I just, there's obviously other issues within the game and stuff like that, but just I think it hit me the other week. I was like, do you know what? There's so many people that help me out and do all these things because they just want to see someone do something, and that's just bonds us together. Again, we could go into another podcast about all this. Dream dinner guest and why, or I could change that to dream podcast guest.
For me, that would be Jason Williams, white chocolate, basketball player. So it's probably not relevant to YouTube. I didn't know who he is. But that was growing up. That was like my like idol. Like back talk about old technology. Back in the days when you wanted to see a video clip of basketball, you had to go on to like LimeWire or iMesh and spend like 45 minutes downloading it 90-second clip, and they watch it in like 240p, like that's what, so like I grew up loving guys like that and all, and I always just thought he was a really interesting person, like a really interesting life outside of basketball, like so anyway him.
Tony.
I'm going to answer basketball related too. Just it's been on my mind. I'm going to manifest it because I at some point I think it's going to happen. Maybe I'm a bit mad. It's a bit dreaming, but Reggie Miller. I would love to sit down with Reggie Miller because just the relationship he had with his sister and him being not as good as her and being this skinny unorthodox shooter. I just like his journey. I love his energy. I love the way he played the game just with such for tenacity, and he was ferocious. And
Man,
I just think, and he just comes across like a great guy. I'd like to interview him.
we talked to him in the Courtside Collective. He was one of those.
I didn't I didn't even know
Well, it
that.
was one of those ones where like, because
One
it
question.
was no, it was like the phone interviews. So it's not quite the same, like So like when it was the NBA finals or like a big game or the All-Star game, they do like a panel thing where you could just do a phone-in interview. So that's almost with like Magic Johnson a few years later. I think I'm 90% sure it was Reggie Miller and Doc Rivers and
Yeah,
someone else,
I
like Mark
remember. I
Jackson.
remember. You're right. But I want him to. I want him to
You
come
only come to your
back.
house, took him dinner and stuff.
Now I want to host him in Belfast. So you could give me 5 years or less.
All Star Game 2030 live show with Reggie Miller. Is that what I'm hearing? Look, if there's any two men to
Why
get it
not?
done, it's you two.
You'll be brought in for the extra help, I suspect, Orla.
Final question before I let you go. If your life was a book, what chapter would this be called?
Oh, it's a good one.
This chap,
This chapter, yeah.
so like the Courtside Collective chapter, or like where I am today.
Where you're at today, but you could also, if the Courtside Collective was to be a book, what would this chapter be? And I've actually robbed that question from Josh Hart had a podcast. He has one now
Yeah.
again, but he had one with his business partner, and that was one of their questions, and I robbed that.
Um, the Courtside Collective will be like chapter 4, and it's will be like chapter 7 now. No, I'm only joking. The Courtside Collective, well, the one now would probably be New Beginnings, because I recently have emigrated from Derry to Limerick. So I've traversed the country, So I've got a house now in Limerick. With my partner Orla, she's a very talented basketball player, and we had a very short discussion about like moving to Derry or moving to Limerick, and Limerick won pretty fast, So I've got a house in Limerick now. I live in Limerick, but yeah, but it's been great. I already know a lot of people down there. Free basketball, of course. Great basketball community. So yeah, I'm enjoying time down there. So new beginnings, I think.
How do they do with the Derry accent down there?
Not very well. Especially like see in the McDonald's drive-through when they can't see your face and it's just like a machine. Like it's a disaster. Even when I speak really slow, it's ironic too. My friend was for the Course I Collected was a podcast, an audio podcast. So
Brilliant. Brilliant.
my,
And it was also pre-Derry Girls as well. No,
Yeah.
oh, I get that
you'd
all
be
the
doing
time. Do you
well.
watch Dairy Girls? Yeah, yeah, I do.
You heard it here first. The Courtside Collective made the Derry accent popular, not Derry
Not
Girls.
Dairy Girls.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Tony, for you, what's this chapter called?
I think it's grounded. I think that, a lot of my life and career to date has been up in the air, moving around. I'm actually currently in an apartment in Belfast that I've been renting for 3 years. I'm about to move to a new wee home that I've bought over still in South Belfast, and so I feel very grounded. My partner and I have got that house, and yeah, I just feel very, very grounded. The business is going well, and it feels it's like, okay, yeah. So that's what I would say is quite grounded, which is quite exciting because on top of like Niall's like the new beginnings, maybe with the Courtside Collective coming back, who knows? But it feels like when you're grounded, you can grow. That makes sense.
Amazing. Well, guys, I knew this would be great, and it's surpassed that. I have to actually stop because we've hit 2 hours. Thank you both so much for everything and for your very, very, very kind words during this and for everything you did before. And I'm looking forward to the All Star game and the Courtside Collective relaunching. So I'll be sure to link everything there, but most people know anyway. But guys, thanks a million.
Thank you very
Orla,
much.
if somebody made it to the 2 hours right now, I want to see somebody drop a elephant in the comments. If anyone's listened all the way here, get on the socials and drop elephant because I don't believe anyone's going to listen to 2 hours of Niall and I talking nonsense. But you're very good to have us on, and well done with the sideline. Yeah, sideline live. It's been
Yeah, it's
brilliant.
been
Keep
brilliant.
it
Thank you
going.
very much.